I'm Wilf Nichols and welcome to Season 2 of Homegrown. It was your response that gave us the encouragement to put 13 new shows together for your viewing and gardening pleasure. We'll start off this season in Logie Bay, where we'll visit with Chris Swires of CD Trees. Instead of importing most of their hardy trees and shrubs, Chris has made a concerted effort to propagate and grow their own. Sure, there's been some pitfalls, but now they are producing high quality plants well suited to Newfoundland growing conditions. CD Trees are making special efforts to highlight native plants, and I'll show you what they have done and give you some ideas of what you can do in your garden. Debbie Preston is back with us again this year, and she's going to concentrate on the many diseases we have to contend with now and then in your garden. Debbie's first problem is the tomato and the common troubles you might have when growing these tasty fruits. More and more people are building greenhouses and growing tomatoes, peppers and even eggplants. Debbie will give us some solid advice on how to minimize the diseases that can lie in wait for the tomato grower. Hiking has become a very popular pastime for so many people in the province. Anywhere you go in Newfoundland and Labrador, there are wonderful native plants with a beauty and interest that's way too easily missed. Well, we won't miss them, and each week we'll show you a native species. First up is a type of plant that many might be surprised even grows here. It's the orchid. We'll have 2 examples of native orchids that are just beautiful. Well, I hope that whets your appetite, and when we come back we'll be in Logie Bay. Welcome back. We're in rainy Logie Bay at the moment, but I'm at a beautiful nursery right here in Logie Bay at CD's Trees. You'd never guess the number of plants back here when you just drive along the road. It's beautiful in here, and CD's Trees is owned and operated, well, here's the C, Chris Swires. Nice to see you, Chris.
Hi, Wilf. Nice to have you here.
This is beautiful back here. How long have you been doing all this?
Well, we've been 10 years learning and producing. The last 5 years have been the most productive years, perhaps. We've built our inventory now to quite a lot of plants.
Right.
We're up now, I believe, to about 6,000 plants.
Wow.
And most of them, 60% of them anyway, I think, have been produced right here.
Well, we've got a beautiful mass of Weigelas here, and some in flower over there. We've got, I've seen Philadelphus or the mock orange behind us. We've got conifers. We've got a whole range of plant material. Do you do annuals and perennials and things like that?
Well, we collaborate with one of our other nursery friends in Clarenville, Balsam Gardens, and we've been a number of years now transferring trees and shrubs for their flower material, perennials and annuals that we sell here as well.
So industry, swapping with industry.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's really exciting about sort of people taking up niches within the industry.
Right.
And so what I'm really excited about is the fact that you are producing a lot of your own plants, really high quality shrubs. And where do you do that?
We've one of our cold frames over here where we've set it up basically as a workshop right next to another area where we mix soil. Right. And we can go over there and have a look if you want.
Well, let's go. Okay.
Right.
Hey, this is exciting. Boy, it looks like we got in just in time. It's teeming out there. There's some beautiful plants here. This is a nice variegated Weigelia. So you produce these right here?
Yes, we do. To get a plant that size, perhaps we're 3 years into it.
Yeah.
We start from a rooted cutting, and if you want, I can take one for you.
Well, that's right, because of course you've got to do cuttings, because if you try to do this from seed, you might not get the variegation. So you've got to clone it.
In order
yeah, show us.
In order to properly duplicate, you need to be able to take a sample of the existing plant, and we'll just snip that right there like that. And we do what's called a nodal cutting.
Right.
So right here now, besides the leader, we have a couple of extra nodes. What we do is actually just pinch those leaves, and we dip
so that
this
one right there is the node?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we dip that node in a rooting hormone, and then right in the ground it goes.
Right. And what is this mix?
This mix right here, right now, is purely Pro Mix, and that's the way they'd stay throughout the period from mid-July, perhaps until the end of August.
So you start these in mid-July, yeah?
Absolutely.
Right.
And towards the end of August, we'd expect to see some new growth coming on these plants.
Right.
And we'd just give them a little tug to make sure that they've rooted, and once that's happened, then we can be pretty sure that they're rooted, and they'll be treated then as all the rest of the plants here in the nursery.
Well, I mean, the production is beautiful. Look at the quality of that. Look at the roots.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So how old would this one be?
This one has been in a styrofoam container that we use for approximately about a year.
A year.
We'll take our cuttings, as I said, late July, early August, and once they've established, we overwinter them in one of the other greenhouses, and then in spring they start quite early growing again. About mid-March, I would expect temperatures in our greenhouse start going up again without any added heat.
Right.
And then once it's warm enough in these cooler greenhouses, we like to keep it above freezing before we move them out again.
Sure.
And then we let them have a probably 3 or 4 month period here, and they're transplanted to another container.
And then this can go straight into a gallon or a 2-gallon pot.
That's
because
correct.
There's so many roots. That's beautiful. So this is like a 3-year-old plant now in a, what's that, a 3-gallon pot?
That's a 5-gallon pot.
A 5-gallon pot. Boy, clear that rain out there. I'm glad we're inside here. And then we've got a smaller Weigelia here. This one, this beautiful foliage on this one. What's this one called?
Absolutely, it's a Tango Weigelia.
Tango.
And bronze foliage with a magenta color flower comes.
And then these, again, all the propagation. And I expect we'll see, look at that. Look at the roots under there.
Right.
Wow, that's good going.
Those again would be approximately a year old.
Yeah.
And another month or so they'll be ready for transplanting to the 1-gallon pot, where they'll stay for a year to 2 years maybe.
Well, I am impressed, Chris. This is great. And what I really like about this is, it used to be we'd say that something like 90-95% of all hardy stock was imported, but you're turning the tables on that and probably producing what, 50-60%?
Well, right now I think we're approximately a 60% stage where we produce 60% of what we have here in the nursery. We maintain an inventory right now of about 6,000 plants.
Wow.
And like I say, 60% of that would be produced right here.
Well, I think that really bodes well for the industry here in Newfoundland and Labrador to see producers producing good quality hardy plants. So I want to thank you for showing us around. It's been a delight.
Great, my pleasure.
Okay.
Good to see you.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, we've been at CD's Trees looking at these wonderful plants from all over the world. But when I was talking to Chris and Debbie about that, I thought, well, do they have any native plants? And Chris and Debbie are doing quite a bit of work with native plants, and some of our native shrubs and trees do really well in a garden. So I thought we would just take advantage of being out at CD's Trees to have a look at some of these native plants. And the first one I think we'd look at is this one. It's called Potentilla fruticosa, or the shrubby cinquefoil, and of all the native shrubs and trees within the Canadian landscape industry, this is the most popular. It's the largest selling plant right the way across the country because it's so hardy right the way across. You can grow this in Manitoba, in Alberta, in all sorts of places. And it's a native plant of Canada, and it's a native plant of Newfoundland and Labrador. You can get all sorts of different varieties of shrubby cinquefoil. Mostly they're yellow or cream colored, but there's also some white colored ones like Abbotsford, and there's some beautiful pink ones coming on the market now. There's Pink Beauty, and so look out for shrubby cinquefoils. Put them in a sunny spot. They don't mind peaty, acidic soil. You can grow these in almost any place, and they are surprisingly drought hardy, and funnily enough, they can even take some wet peaty soil as well. So shrubby cinquefoil, a great plant in a garden. But plants you might not know are native would be this one over here. A very popular plant again. It's got these red twigs, and sometimes the name of this is red twig or red osier dogwood. The Latin name for this is Cornus stolonifera. And we grow this as a shrub, often at the back of a garden, and we like this in winter time because when all the leaves are off, you've got these wonderful red stems standing up there in amongst the snow. It's a beautiful native plant, native in Newfoundland and Labrador, and native in most provinces across the country. Well, just like humans have variation, we have all sorts of different races, plant species themselves are quite variable. So this one is a classic form of red osier dogwood, but the one I've got behind is this one with a beautiful variegated leaf. So it's just the same species, but a variant of that species of red osier dogwood, but a beautiful plant for foliage in the garden. If you've got a wet spot that's a little bit sunny, then you might want to go for something called meadowsweet or spirea. And here's a beautiful spirea that I got out of Chris's nursery, and it's not in flower yet, but I've got one in flower. There it is. Beautiful white or pinkish flowered shrub that doesn't mind having its feet wet. In fact, it prefers it to be in a wet area, and sometimes a wet, muddy area is a difficult place to grow some shrubs. So think about spirea, and our native spirea called Spirea latifolia or meadowsweet does really well. What else we got? Well, within our forests we have a number of different conifer species. Our most common conifer here is white spruce, and we have black spruce, and we also have balsam fir. And I've got all those three right here. In fact, let's go through them one by one. This beautiful mass of seedlings here, or they might even be cuttings. This one is the balsam fir, and it's a really nice tree in the garden. What I like about this plant is it's very easy to get on with. You couldn't do this with many spruces. You'd end up bleeding. So balsam fir, beautiful conifer in the garden, but this is a spruce, and you can see the differences is quite obvious. Sharper leaves, and this one is a white spruce, and really a fine plant in the garden, and I wish people would grow this more. Incredibly hardy, a fine looking plant if it gets light from all angles. What have we got here? Well, our anthem talks about pine-clad hills. There's not actually many pine-clad hills here in the province, but we do have two native pines, and this one is a white pine, and you'll find that as you go through, get off of the Avalon, go through Terra Nova and all the way to the west coast, and the further west you go and the sandier the soil, the more pines you will see, and white pine has got a beautiful architecture in the garden. So think about maybe a native white pine. Last of the lot, well, I would think about this plant. It's a viburnum. This one is called Viburnum cassinoides, or the northern wild raisin. This one is not old enough to have a lot of flowers, but it will have a mass of creamy flowers that finish up with bluish berries. The berries are gorgeous. They go green, then they go pink, then they go blue, and finally they go black. So, some wonderful plants to put into your garden, all native, and I think they're all garden worthy. And we'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. Any problems with your tomato plants? Well, Debbie Preston's here with some useful information on how to keep those plants productive and beautiful.
Welcome, and this week we're going to start in the greenhouse. A lot of home gardeners have developed greenhouses to grow some of the common vegetables that need a longer season, that can handle our cool summers. Things like tomatoes, cucumbers, green peppers. These are good vegetables to grow in your greenhouse. Of course, in the greenhouse, the gardener has total control of the environment. The water that the plant gets, the amount of air circulation, the humidity that's around the plant, the amount of sunlight even that the plant is getting can be controlled by the gardener. Because of that, a lot of the disease problems are eliminated in the greenhouse. However, some of the disease problems that you do develop, we can go back and look at the environment and look at our cultural methods and know how to control those problems because of that. We have a lovely crop of tomatoes in this greenhouse, but you can see that we're starting to run into some problems. Some of the leaves are starting to turn yellow and things like that. So what is going wrong with our plants? How do we know what's happening? How do we learn about what's going on in our greenhouse? We step back and look at the whole picture. Look at the amount of air circulation that's in the greenhouse. Is the area around the plant sufficient for the plant? Is it getting enough water? Is it getting the proper nutrients? Is it getting a good air circulation, the proper temperature? Are all those cultural things correct for this type of plant? We know that tomatoes have a large root system, and if you look at the pot on this one, it's a fairly large pot, but it might be a little bit confining for one tomato plant. The soil mix in this case is 50% soil and 50% peat, which is a really nice mix for tomatoes. You get some of that minerals along with a good well-draining soil mix for the greenhouse. But it's a black pot, so the black pot is heating up in the sunshine quite hot, quite quickly, and could be drying out the roots very, very quickly. So that was going to require more watering on the part of the gardener. Something to keep in mind. Maybe the mineral mix in the soil is used up, so we want to probably keep a soil test. The fertilizer that you're using, keep an eye on that. Is it giving it the proper nutrients for the plant? Tomatoes are heavy feeders and they need a lot of calcium, so adding lime to the soil helps at the beginning of the year, but that might run out about halfway through the season, so you may be needing to add a nutrient that has calcium in it. Some of the tomato fertilizers have additional calcium, so that might be a good thing to think about. In this case, this leaf spot that's developing, is it from an insect problem or a disease problem? Checking the plants, checking very closely, looking at the leaves and turning the leaves over, looking at the back of the leaf, checking to see if there's any insects, things like aphids or mites are a good thing to look at. In this case, we don't see any insects, but we do see, when you look really closely at some of the upper leaves, some of the newer leaves, you see this little tiny cell damage or spotting developing, especially when you hold it up to the light, starting quite early. So that's in the new leaves, and as you move down through the older leaves, it's getting worse. The spots are turning black. And if you actually look at them under a microscope, you can see little black spots, which are actually the fungus spores, which are on the leaf. And as you go right down through, the leaves turn yellow and eventually dry and fall off. It's not affecting the fruit, but the fruit can get sun scald from the leaves being defoliated. So if you look at what's common problems with tomatoes, you find out that Septoria leaf spot has those symptoms. Septoria leaf spot is a fungus that overwinters on old foliage, especially in established greenhouses from the year before. So a good control measure is to make sure in the fall that you clean out the old tomato plants, that you sterilize the greenhouse benches, wash down the soil, the ground, the walls. Dilute bleach solution is perfect for this if there's no other plants in the greenhouse. And that can control the leaf spot from developing in your plants next year. At this point, when you've got it right through the plants, you can use a control like Bordeaux for this year's crop and know what to do in the fall for next year's crop. However, Bordeaux, of course, is a chemical problem, so you need to make sure that you follow the directions on the label. It's something that's going to have to be applied every 7 to 10 days. So it's not something that you want to use lightly. Make sure that you follow the directions. And if you control the sanitation in your greenhouse, you shouldn't have a problem next year. So hopefully you've learned a little bit about growing tomatoes in your greenhouse, and hopefully you'll have a good success with your crop next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Lots of great advice on growing tomatoes. Now, when you walk around this province, anywhere in the province, there are wonderful native plants. Let's go and see a couple now. I'm walking along a boardwalk at Munn Botanical Garden through a bog. And in a bog there are all sorts of interesting plants. Plants like pitcher plants and plants like orchids. And it's amazing. You think of orchids as sort of exotic plants from the tropics and everything. But in Newfoundland and Labrador, there are something like 38 to 40 different species of orchids, and many of those are in bogs. Probably the most common and the most obvious would be the scent bottle orchid, and there's one right down over here. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous plant. Beautiful white flowers that stand up usually in around July and into August. It's got a beautiful scent, that's why it's called the scent bottle, and it has a common name like scent bottle, but also things like rain orchid, it's sometimes known as, or bog candles. I know it, unfortunately, by its Latin name, which is Platanthera dilatata. There are orchids all over this province. I'm sure you've seen things like the lady slipper orchid. And over on the west coast, there's a yellow lady slipper, which is a beautiful orchid. Now, one thing about orchids is that they have very specific ecological needs. So they're adapted to their habitats. And for the likes of you and I to go and get an orchid and take it out of a bog or take it out of a forest and expect it to grow in our own gardens, well, don't expect anything from those. They really are not adapted to as a garden plant. So leave them where they are. They'll come back year after year. You enjoy them, take a few photographs and leave them for someone else to enjoy the next year. So enjoy Newfoundland and Labrador orchids. They're beautiful. Well, there you have it. Season 2, show 1 done. Didn't it fly by? Next week will find us in the beautiful residential garden of Pat and Toby Rivers. The kids are all grown up now, so what was once the soccer pitch is now a lovely garden with lots of surprises. Annuals, perennials, fountains, vegetables all find a home here. A troublesome sloping front lawn, which was a nightmare to mow and maintain, has been replaced with a low shrub border. It's the envy of the neighborhood and way less work. Debbie will be back with some advice on doing some container gardening. Containerized plants can have their own set of problems, and Debbie will sort out a number of these. I'll talk to you about sphagnum, which is so abundant throughout the province. It's truly a fascinating plant, but so underappreciated. Well, I hope you enjoyed the first show of the new season, and we'll see you again next week.